Good afternoon. I call to order the Hamilton County Commission staff meeting of June the 1st. Good afternoon, Madam Commissioners.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. We're also joined by our clerk of the board and our county administrator. Good afternoon to both of you. Yes, ma'am.
Afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Well, we're going to get started with our agenda. We have some very interesting items on our agenda. But before I do that, I wanted to let you know that today is a national holiday. And I heard it on the radio on the way in. And the national holiday is to say something nice to someone today. So if you haven't already been doing it, today is a great day to start. Okay, so I'll just move right along. I know all of you have already been nice to people today. We're going to our first order of business on our agenda, which is TLRC reporting on the Indigent Care, Senior Services, and Mental Health Levy. Lisa Webb, I have down, is going to lead this discussion. I see Lisa up there. Hi, Lisa.
Hello, commissioners. Hi, Lisa Webb from County Administration. I oversee the county tax levy process, and we are here to bring forward the midpoint reviews on the Indigent Care Levy, Mental Health Levy, and Senior Services Levy. I'm joined by Gwen McFarland, the chair of the Tax Levy Review Committee, as well as the 3 committee chairs for those reports. And I'm actually going to turn that meeting over, the introductions over to Gwen to handle that.
Thank you. Am I unmuted? Yes, I'm unmuted. Can you hear me?
I can hear
First
you.
of all, I would like to thank our Honorable County Commissioner Stephanie Dumas, President Alicia Reese, Vice President Denise Driehaus, Honorable Commissioner as well. I want to thank you all for, again, the great work that you've done in helping to get new members into our TLRC committee. They are doing well. They're coming in, hitting the road running. Since October, we have had multiple meetings. Of course, they've all been virtual to prepare for this day today. So the committee meetings have occurred weekends, holidays. Some of the members were out of town, but with virtual, we were able to continue to move these meetings and meet with all of the agencies that are involved in this with the TLRC for our meeting today. I'm going to introduce you to the chairs of the committee. The first one is the Indigent Care Levy, and that's chaired by Robert Ferner. And then we have the Mental Health Levy, which is chaired by Ed Herzig, Dr. Ed Herzig, and the Senior Services, which is chaired by Mark Quarry. And I'm not going to take the thunder away from them. I want you all to have the opportunity to hear from them exactly what they have been doing. And, you know, and I also have to just say, Lisa Webb continues to be a rock. She is a great organizer, a great mobilizer. She has had to work with us and answer our questions. And she's also set up strategic meetings with all of the individuals that we work with. I cannot tell you how valuable she is and has been to this agency. Historically, I mean, she is like a dictionary, you know, and she's also like a sponge. You know, you give her some information and she just opens up just like a sponge. So we are so fortunate to have Lisa at the helm with us as well. So I'm going to turn it over to the first chair and I'm doing it alphabetically so we can, you know, be smart that way. So I'm going to start with the Indigent Care Levy, Robert, and then Robert, after you're finished, I'll have you introduce Ed Herzig with the Mental Health Levy. And then after he's finished, Mark Quarry with Senior Services. So with, I'd like to now turn it over to the Indigent Care Levy, Robert Ferner. Can you start, please?
Sure. Hi, I'm Bob Fernier. I've met everyone except Commissioner Dumas. So hello. And I've been on the Tax Levy Review Committee, I think 4 or 5 years now. And I started out with the Indigent Care Levy with Gwen and Jeanette Hargreaves. And I rolled on to the chairship just this year for the mid-cycle review. We're here to report today on how the Indigent Care recipients, levy recipients are doing. Part of our charge is in mid-cycle to do just that, to first see whether all of the agencies are in compliance. Then secondly, to make some recommendations going forward into the next levy cycle. The health and hospitalization indigent care levies been in effect since 1966. It started out funding a single hospital, and that was General Hospital back in 1966, which is now UC Medical Center. In the 70s, we added on Children's Hospital Medical Center. And then since then, we kind of split the levy funding between those two hospitals and 8 other governmental and nonprofit agencies, all dealing with health and hospitalization services for the indigent in Hamilton County. Right now, we're in the middle of a 5-year cycle. It used to be a 3-year levy, and then by the concurrence of the commissioners, we switched it from a 3 to a 5-year levy. So it'll be up again, or we'll start talking about it in 2022. And there are going to be a couple of issues that we're not going to talk about at length today, but we want you to think about going forward into that next levy. Obviously, we're coming out of perhaps one of the greatest health crises. Yes, can you hear me?
I can hear you just a little garbled, maybe.
Oh, sorry. Is it still garbled? I moved it closer. Let me see if this is working.
Still garbled.
Hold on one second. I've got that Fioptics high-speed internet, so it shouldn't be doing that.
Okay. I could hear you. We didn't miss anything, but.
Yeah, I'm still hearing kind of garbled too. I specifically came back from our condo in Sandusky because I thought that the internet would be stronger. So anyway,
okay.
Just interrupt me whenever you miss anything. Right now, we're just going over what's already happened. We found all the agencies in compliance with their agreements with the county. We found them all to be spending the funds wisely, although revenues were up the first half of the cycle. Unfortunately, because we're in this tremendous healthcare crisis, not only with the pandemic, but the opioid epidemic, and a lot of our agencies deal with that. We're going to be at the point where by the end of the cycle, we may be running short of funds, which is not unusual because these agencies, they tend to do a lot more with less. And we found all of them to be stellar performers in managing and being stewards of county funds. But by the same token, the needs are ever growing, particularly because of the pandemic and because of the opioid crisis. The committee met 10 times with agencies. We had our own handful of meetings, both as a subcommittee and as a full committee. We reviewed the Health Management Associates, a review of the agencies which were put together in order to get them on the ballot. So we had a comprehensive review. We feel very comfortable with where these agencies are. So we're giving them high marks for their performance through the middle of the cycle. Where we see, where we have concerns, I guess, is because of the lack of increases. We find ourselves being in a position where when there are catastrophes like, have befallen the county in the last few years because of the opioid crisis first, and then on top of that, because of the pandemic, these agencies have little ability to become creative, to expand services, and we find ourselves kind of choked by our own budget and by our own limitations. And we recognize that we don't want to raise taxes within the county, but we do need to point out that that these agencies are probably going to ask for more funding. These 10 agencies and hospitals, in 2022. So in anticipation of that, both the committee and the subcommittee wanted to raise a couple of issues to give the commissioners some flexibility. The first issue, of course, is dealing with, I shouldn't say of course, one of the issues is dealing with the impact of the ACA, the Affordable Care Act. Now that it looks like the Affordable Care Act is going to be in place for a few more years and perhaps beyond, the commission may want to have a look at or study what impact, the ongoing availability of the ACA is going to have on indigent care in Hamilton County. I want to be clear to point out that none of our agencies are necessarily pocketing money because they're double dipping from the ACA funds and from the indigent care levy. We investigated and made sure that the funding that we provide as a county is not coming from, it's not duplicative of ACA recipients. So whether it's with jail medical services, whether it's through the hospital, the funds that we provide aren't going to those who could otherwise receive ACA funding. These are folks who are falling through the cracks. Having said that, however, the commission may want to look at the impact of the ACA to adjust its priorities going forward beyond 2022 to say, how can we better direct our dollars to be more stewards over, have more of a voice of how the county money is being spent because the ACA is available out there. The other issue that we thought the commission might want to look at is that we and I don't know if this is true for all of our levies, but for some of them certainly, we provide some state mandated services that used to be part of the general fund and were shifted over during times of fiscal crisis onto the levies. And it may be time, and this is obviously a commission decision, something you have to make, to look at whether or not some of those services need to be shifted back over into the general fund for no other reason than to give the commissioners greater flexibility on how the commissioners decide those indigent care funds ought to be used. So that's our report. And I apologize, Commissioner Reese. It's nice to see you again. I apologize for the poor sound quality. It must be my internet. So I can even see my face freezing up, which is, I'm not a good selfie type person. So everybody, say something nice to somebody today. Have mercy on me. Thank you.
Right. I don't think we missed a word though. Thank you.
Right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Are there any questions relating to the indigent care report from the commissioners before I move on to the next report?
So, Madam President, yeah.
Oh,
were you going to go in order?
Yeah,
that's fine. Go on.
Okay. So, thank you, Bob, for the report out, and thanks for the committee's work on this. Indigent care has always been a very challenging levy because the needs are so dire for the folks that receive the services. And so I am glad that you are looking at, what we can do to manage our way through the current time. And then by the time we get to the levy being on the ballot, kind of what that looks like. I too have wondered about some of the sheriff's services that are in the levy and trying to convert some of those back over to the general fund. I'm not sure we could do it all in one fell swoop because it's a lot of money, but I do think it's important to start to think through that. Of course, that would necessitate an increase in my mind. So I don't know, where the board is on that or where we will be in a year or two on that, but I'm glad you guys are thinking through it and thinking kind of broadly about what the options are related to that levy and the needs that are served there. So thanks for doing that work.
Commissioner Driehaus, I would just add to that as well that the main purpose of these midpoint reviews is for the tax levy committee to meet with the levy agencies and get an idea of what's coming up so that we can serve as an update to the commissioners in advance of the next levy review. I would mention all three of these levies are actually up to be reviewed and on the ballot for November of 2022. So they are right around the corner, but hopefully we're providing some insight and fair warning to give time for the commission to make decisions before the review gets started and give some direction.
At least,
Thank you.
thank you for reiterating that. This is like, just like when you have a mid-cycle or when you're pausing to reevaluate and reassess what was initially occurred when the levy was first passed. And then the mid-cycle is to look at how we're doing. And then as we move forward, are there any issues or things that you all may think as commissioners that we need to address? And we're just sharing that with you so that you can give you some thought, give you an opportunity to think about it as we move forward in preparation for 2022.
Madam President, I kind of muddled up my message there. Bob, I didn't mean to confuse, and I apologize. If we were to take some of the sheriff's services out of the levy, it would allow the levy to address more of the needs that we hear about at all the public hearings every time the levy comes up. So I apologize. We thought about an increase last time, but maybe if we can relieve the levy of some of these other responsibilities, then maybe that puts us in a better position. So anyway, that's what I meant to say. I'm pretty sure I didn't get there. So that's what I meant to say.
And thank you. And I believe that's what Mr. Furrier was also saying. Jeff, it would be great if we could have, for me at least, and I'm sure the other commissioners, historical perspective of what used to be in the general budget and what is now included in the levy. And considering that our revenue, our reserve is much higher than we expected it to be. Not that we want to spend it because we want to keep the rainy day fund, but that certainly is an option that we could take a look at as a commission as we continue to review. So, and it's very impressive, Mr. Furrier, you had 10 meetings with all this pandemic. You were determined to make sure that this happened. So Jeff, you were getting ready to say something.
No, Madam President, I was just saying we can absolutely give you some historical perspective on that, because the winds have changed on that a bit historically in terms of what's been in the levy, what has not. And the dynamic that's being described here in terms of the pressures on the levy is certainly one that that exists and has existed, and how we go about addressing that in the next levy cycle will be very important. Recognizing as well that the 5 and 10 year strategic plan for the general fund does not have those costs included either. So we'll have to think about it. And as Lisa said, the whole purpose of these mid-cycle reviews is to give us time to start to strategically plan on these things and make sure that we can get as much of all of this done as possible.
Thank you. Vice President Reese, did you want to make a comment or have any questions?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the midterm report. Yeah, a couple things. I think certainly, Jeff, I look forward. That will be very helpful for me as well. But I do want to look at, obviously, I understand is there a consultant for this one or just for the other levy? No consultant? No,
the midpoints do not have consultants. It's the TLRC broken into subcommittees, and each subcommittee goes and meets with the agencies. In the case of, say, mental health, which will be up next, that's one meeting and discussion. In this case, it was 10 Zoom calls over the course of 2 days to get through all of them. But yes, it's just the committee doing updates and looking at the levy plan and hearing from the agencies.
Okay, thanks. And just looking at, I guess we'll have a better sense economically, possibly by the end of this year, on really what the effect of COVID has had economically on our citizens, because we're looking at a total picture. And one of the issues obviously is, people possibly losing their homes because of property taxes. And we want to, at one hand, kind of keep that low. We don't want to price people out of the county. And a lot of people who are just getting back to work, but even if they're just getting back to work, they have still lost months of revenue. And that is hard to make up, just because you went back today doesn't mean you're going to get a check to balance your budget from all those months of lost business, small businesses, small business owners, et cetera. So keeping that in mind, looking at the total economic condition of the county, I think it'd be important as we move forward. But also the second thing is that I saw where the effects of COVID, yes, we've been giving out, free shots. But there are people who got sick before the shot and have medical bills that are jumping through the roof, my understanding. And so that may fall on the indigent care. I want to know that up it. How much did it up it? And we're starting to see those medical bills. We probably won't know till probably about the end of the year how those medical bills are coming in, because just because you're in the hospital now, some people get a medical bill almost a year later. And we're talking, from what I was seeing, $22,000, $50,000 bills. Yes, thank God they're still alive. But with the bill, it could certainly take them economically under. So just wanted to kind of see what that looks like at the end of the year. And I also think it's important for us to look at the other areas that can't come off of here. Maybe, possibly, I'm not sure if it qualifies, but if we're looking at this American Rescue, is there some things on here that could be taken off the burden of the people? Because again, we are trying to rescue the American people, trying to rescue the citizens. So we probably do need to be looking at this quicker, and maybe Jeff and Lisa or Bob or Gwen could get us something before we start making final votes on the American Rescue Plan, if there is possibly some things on here that you all think that we should take a look at that could take it off the books, as Commissioner Driehaus has said, think it creatively, or President Dumas. So that's what I would kind of be looking at as we look at this issue. So thank you.
Thank you. I just would add, I absolutely agree. This levy really is the safety net when it comes to healthcare for our citizens. People losing jobs, people downgrading their healthcare because it's so expensive, but then they have a major illness and they can't cover everything. And that's where University and Children's, with the funding we give for this levy, provides and closes that gap and helps those families really to remain in their homes and continue their lives.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Okay, thank you.
I'd like to introduce my colleague and friend, Ed Herzig, who's going to talk about the mental health levy mid-cycle review. Go ahead, Ed. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Commissioners, good afternoon.
Mm-hmm.
My subcommittee consisted of Dr. Jenny O'Donnell and Bishop Ennis Tate, and we had the opportunity to review the Mental Health and Rehabilitation Services Board. Now, this is a board that acts as an executive where they direct and they look at the way things are being done and distribute money for mental health and addiction services, et cetera. And what we did as a committee was we reviewed the last levy report prior to when this levy was passed and looked at the recommendations that were put forward to make changes in the Mental Health and Rehabilitation Services Board. I need to emphasize that this board is a board of volunteers. The organization itself functions with the smallest administrative staff of any part of the state. They only have 25 members. And from that perspective, I think they're doing a particularly good job with a smaller staff. The big issue here is the same issue that we run into all the time: decreasing federal and state funds that are being used to help with mental health, addiction services, et cetera. And of course, this has been complicated by the COVID outbreak, the COVID pandemic, which has increased the need for mental health services. We've read and you've seen in the papers the need for treatment of depression, increased rates of suicide, and things like that. The goal is to be cost efficient, responsive to community needs, and of high quality. And you do that by both monitoring your expenses, looking at your income, and at the same time demanding data. This serves a significant number of clients, and from 2016 to 2019, they served some 20,600 citizens of Hamilton County every year. The majority were both male and African American, and they also transitioned to a new operating system, which was part of one of our recommendations, that is more efficient. Our main concern at that time was the focus on the reduction in state and federal funding and how that would affect the ability to deliver services through the county. The state funding has fallen from a high of $5.6 million annually in 2014 to $2.4 million in 2020. There was an increase, slight increase from a low of 1.9 in 2016, but it's still lower than it had been previously. Revenue from the mental health levy had averaged about $34 million, and I'll show you that on a slide in a second, if you permit me to share my screen. And we expect to have a bit of an increase over the last 2 years of the levy. During the period ending in 2022, expenses were increasing for provider contracts, and yet the administration costs remained flat. The ending balance, however, is shrinking. And one of the purposes of the Tax Levy Review Committee is to look at ending balances, noting that if your balance drops too low, if an emergency, such as a COVID pandemic, comes along, you won't have the resources to respond in a quick and efficient manner because you have no other way to raise income, especially with this levy. And I just want to show you this data. If I could share my screen here. I included this in the letter that we transmitted to you. Let me make this a bit bigger. And I think this makes the point. As you can see in the second line, the revenues have remained reasonably flat from the levy, 35 million and change. The beginning balance, as you can see, has been gradually going down, projected through 2022 being down to 15.5 million. Provider contracts have gone up from 32.5 to 38.3. The operating, however, has remained reasonably flat during that same period of time. And then, of course, there's additional services and fees. And then finally, when they come back to ask for further funding, there's going to be an expense to pay for that too. But you can see that the numbers are just there. And that makes, I think, the point of what we're talking about. The other changes that are occurring are external to the board, such as law enforcement behavioral health interface, which is more emphasis on behavioral health needs, especially when it comes to incarceration and everybody knows that the Hamilton County Jail is probably the largest behavioral health institution in the entire county. Worsening housing crisis, this has been discussed openly in the papers recently, COVID-19 mental health issues, and behavioral health redesign, including the implementation of telehealth, which has added a whole new line of treatment to our program. And the other thing is people have been reaching out for help. There's been an increase in the 281 care calls as well as more telehealth utilization. This will either require more funding or a decrease in the number of clients served. It's the classic conundrum we run into in public service, trying to provide help to the citizens of Hamilton County and trying to keep the budget under control. It gets to be very difficult. Overall, our review showed that this is an efficient, well-run board that is funding essential services to the Hamilton County community. The issue is always increased needs and therefore expenses. Because of the reduction in federal funding and flat state funding, we're going to be running into a financial problem, and that may need to be addressed in 2 years. And the question always arises is what can we do in the future? When the levy is going to be reviewed, we will have an in-depth review by a consultant. So where we stand now is we think it's a good organization doing proper work with reduction in money, providing great services to the citizens of Hamilton County. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Herzig. And you're absolutely right. So many unfunded mandates are coming down from the state. Specifically, I know Senate Bill 17, I'm keeping an eye out for that. As we know, our workers are working, have a higher caseload, but the monies are not being funneled down for the purpose of being able to do an efficient job. I'll open it up for my colleagues to see if there are any questions or comments as it relates to Mr. Herzig's report. Vice President Reese.
Thank you. Thank you for the report. I want to ask you a question, Ed. What are your thoughts on? I know they were saying that in your report it says that federal funding was either flat or reduced. Do we anticipate that might change? It seems to be a focus federally on mental health. Do we have any hope that something might be coming down the pipe that will also help us with this very important issue.
Commissioner, we can always hope. It almost gets to be a religious thing. But the answer is I would hope so. But as I read the tea leaves in Washington, there are strong winds against providing more federal funding or things like that. Hopefully through the ACA, if they increase the mental health funding through the ACA, that would be very helpful. And these are real world needs that need to be addressed. So the answer is I could only hope that they would address this. It'd be also nice if they could address it at the state level too.
State level.
Commissioner,
I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you for the report. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Dreehouse.
Yeah, thank you, Ed. Thank you to the subcommittee for all the hard work on this. This is one where I do think there's an opportunity to look at the money that this board is likely to put towards mental health and behavioral health through the American Rescue Plan within the next couple of years, and the impact that it has then on the funding of the agencies that are also being funded through this part of the levy. So I think, again, I just was checking, we've allocated, or rather the administration has recommended that we allocate $8 million towards mental health, behavioral health through the American Rescue Plan. So I wonder if that may play to our advantage here as we move forward, moving into the levy. So much as like what the discussion with the previous one, maybe we can use some of our resources to help reduce the need to have an increase related to the levy. I mean, I don't know. We'll have to wait to see how things play out. But I think all three of us are always looking for a way to keep things as low cost as possible for residents, but still try to address the needs. And something too, and I'm trying to remember, and I know Commissioner Reese is new, and Commissioner Dumas, I don't remember if you were here for these levies last time. I don't think you were. I think I was pretty new at that point. But there is this, and Alicia, you'll appreciate this, from the state has structured this so that when a levy remains flat and there's no increase, it's actually a decrease to these levies. And so that's a weird thing that we have to always remind ourselves of, that flat's not flat, flat's lower. And unless we increase a levy, it won't even get what it had gotten the previous year. So I suspect that's not changed from any state policy that's been passed. So it's just another thing to worry about at the county level because of what's going on at the state level. To your comment earlier, I'll just leave it at that.
Less that it hasn't changed, but more that we've gotten used to the new normal.
That's right. Right.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And I think, Ed, you have read the tea leaves a little bit, because as Commissioner Dreehouse had indicated, we have a draft from the administrator for the American Rescue Plan, and mental health is top of our list. And so, because really mental health is cyclical. I mean, if we are not, I mean, you look at the violence in the streets and homelessness, joblessness. I know Commissioner Reese talks about that a lot. And so if we don't deal with that mental health component, we're not going to be able to deal with the others. So we have currently looked at that mental health issue as a major priority for this board. So thank you so much for all the work that your committee has done. Okay. Who's next? Mark.
Thank you. Gwen, would you want to do an introduction?
It is my pleasure to introduce the next chair of report, mid-cycle report, and that is Mark Quarry, and he is chairing the Senior Services Levy. Mark?
Thank you, Gwen. Good afternoon, commissioners. Good to see you, and hope you all had a wonderful Memorial Day weekend. The Senior Services Subcommittee was made up of Christy Coons, John Silverman, and myself. And the Senior Services Levy, as you are likely aware, it's largely made up or goes to the Council on Aging here in Hamilton County. a little bit more than 90% of the funding from the levy goes to Council on Aging, since COA, or Council on Aging, is the ESP provider in Hamilton County. In terms of our report, what was nice to see and not surprising, considering such a large portion of this levy is made up and goes to Council on Aging. Many of the findings of the committee that reviewed this levy back when it was fully reviewed and was voted upon by the voters in the county. A lot of those findings from that committee, which by the way was chaired by Dr. Ed Herzig, many of those findings continue. And so I'll run through those here in just a moment. But I mentioned Council on Aging. The other two entities that make up or receive funding for the Senior Services Levy, one would be APS, or it's called Adult Protective Service. That's of Hamilton County Jobs and Family Services, and then the Veterans Services Commission. Those were the other two organizations receiving levy funding. As you're aware, there were 3 additional agencies that received some funding from this levy that were added. One would, and I'll get into them in a moment, but one of them was providing medical care for the county's homeless senior citizens. Another was an entity doing senior medical navigation service. And then the last was a program designed for in-home health care for seniors, and basically also providing some care for caregivers. But I'll touch on that in a moment. As I said, Council on Aging receives about 90%, a little over 90% of the levy funding, and has been the ESP provider for Hamilton County for a number of years. Suzanne Burke, who you all know, and many of the other folks there continue to do just a tremendous job for our county, and especially for our senior citizens in the county. In 2017, when this was last voted on, the senior services levy was actually, it was an increase from 1.29 mils to 1.6 mils, and that equated to an increase of a little over $10 per $100,000 of valuation. And the levy in 2017 was approved by 72% of Hamilton County voters. So in terms of, where we were in 2017 to present day. And again, I'm going to mention a few things from the previous subcommittee's report on this, chaired by Dr. Herzig. Market penetration in 2017 for Council on Aging was 27.3%. By November of just last year in 2020, the market penetration had increased to a little bit more than 32%. Likewise, since there was an increase in millage, there was an increase in levy funding, or in levy revenue. And in 2017, there was a gap of levy funding of almost $20 million. It was 19.6 million. And at that time, the county census of senior citizens or elderly residents was just slightly less than 5,800 residents. What the passage of the 2017 levy did, it did increase the funding from, again, the previously mentioned 19.6 million up to 25.4 million. And the county census, the number of residents to be served had increased from almost 5,800 up to 8,600. And this is consistent with what the 2017 report showed. And unfortunately, and I've got the gray hairs to prove it, we are an aging county. We are getting older, a lot of us. So, this isn't going to change, I don't think. And so on that point, and it's not just specific here to Hamilton County, but it's throughout Ohio. Ohio is actually the 6th largest older population in the United States. Back in 2010, anybody who is 60 years of age or older was 2.3 million. And the projections show that by 2030, so in just 2 decades, the number is going to increase by 33%. Again, from the previous 2.3 million back in 2010 up to 3.1 million. So in Hamilton County is one of the, actually is the main driver of that in our region with some of our neighboring counties of Butler and Claremont and Clinton and Warren and so forth. But we have the highest percentage of households with at least one person 65 or older. And it goes along the lines with total percentage of our population, some of our senior citizens with a disability, and then poverty level as well. So those are some very key statistics to keep in mind, especially as we come up to vote on this again in 2023. As Dr. Herzig pointed out in his committee's report back in 2017, one of the issues that COA, Council on Aging, implemented was the creation of a new program, which is called Fast Track Home. And it's an innovative model, and it helped address some of the short-term needs for our senior citizens, but at a lower cost. And it basically helps these senior citizens as they are transitioning out from, hopefully, this is certainly the goal, is out from a hospital or a nursing home back into their home. But what they found is that they were able to utilize this new program, Fast Track Home, and doing it that way and transitioning them in that manner, it helped them treat a greater percentage of their clients at a fraction of the cost. So that's been an example of something that's been very helpful, very, very productive, and that Council on Aging is going to continue to work on. Council on Aging also implemented a new database program called Care Director, and that was purchased by Council on Aging in addition to the Fast Track Home, but it was purchased and then implemented towards the end of 2018. So that's another issue that they've done since the 2017 report that has benefited their operations. Of course, as we all know, the COVID-19 pandemic impacted the entire world, and it impacted certainly Council on Aging. And so I want to talk about, this is specific to Council on Aging and their response to the COVID-19 pandemic. And they focused on several different areas to continue to provide their service. One was what they titled food security. And this is where they helped distribute a number of different food boxes and worked with different philanthropic organizations throughout the county, and also businesses like La Rosa's and Frisch's, and then especially small and minority-owned restaurants to deliver meals and get these, traditionally, if you think of Meals on Wheels, these types of things into hands of our senior citizens throughout the county as we were all going through the shutdown and trying to adjust to everything. So food security was one of the areas. Another area that they focused on were personal care supplies. And so that's where they worked with some other organizations throughout the county, some businesses and some other philanthropic, organizations, churches, businesses like Frame USA and things like that. But to help deliver PPE, gosh, all these acronyms from COVID, but PPE, personal protective equipment, not only to caregivers and to the seniors, but also throughout the county. Another area was protecting essential workers. While most of us were shut down, there were certain segments of our industry and our business community that continue to function. And so they worked closely, Council on Aging worked closely with the emergency management agencies and the Ohio Department of Aging where they distribute a lot of PPE types of items to those essential workers. And then they worked on some educational aspects as well, trying to help older adults look at their health and their wellness and their safety, especially in the environment of, these senior citizens a lot of times are homebound to a certain degree, if you will, and so they're not quite as out and about as a normal resident would be, someone younger. And so it was all that much more important for Council on Aging to help our recipients of these services learn about their health, their wellness, their safety, and so forth. So that was their response, kind of broadly grouped in those 4 different areas. But Council on Aging did a tremendous job in the midst of the pandemic to continue to serve the residents, senior citizens here in Hamilton County. So where do we go in terms of from now in 2021 until we're going to be voting on this again in 2023? As we stated earlier, we're an aging population. So that census of senior citizens who can be served by Council on Aging is only going to increase. Again, there was the figure of where we're projecting to look at being in 2030. So we're not, I hate to say it, but we're not that far away from 2030. So we just need to really consider that and consider our rapidly aging population, the disability, different folks in poverty and so forth. One of the issues that we also in Council on Aging is already looking at it, and certainly we'll need to look at it here in the next couple of years and ongoing, and that's transportation. And that's the ability of Council on Aging to deliver their services. So they're looking at a number of different programs to help in that effort, but they're trying to look at not only their Meals on Wheels, but hands-on type of assistance and helping some of these folks that assist these senior citizens, but then also vehicles that can accommodate wheelchairs and the different walkers and things that our elderly residents use. I did want to mention earlier, the Council on Aging was awarded a $470,000 Federal Transit Authority grant to help in looking into some of their transportation needs going forward. And then much like with Job and Family Services, I know over the years as I've worked on the Tax Levy Review Committee and we've looked at the Job and Family Services and all the things that they provide us here in Hamilton County, it's no different. There is a home care workforce shortage, just like there is in Job and Family Services. The burnout comes into play a lot. Sometimes then that results in, referrals that are not, picked up quick enough. And so that's certainly an area that they need to look at going forward. And then lastly, just again, earlier, I mentioned that senior citizens are somewhat isolated, and COVID-19 certainly exacerbated that, but continuing to look at the social isolation that occurs with our senior citizens. But like I said, the Council on Aging receives most of the funding. We did not meet with the other 2 entities that were already part of Senior Services Levy, the Adult Protective Services and also the Veteran Services Commission. But as pointed out in Dr. Herzig's report back in 2017, they are providing adequate and certainly beneficial services to their segments of the people that they serve. Then the 3 new agencies, and you all probably know a lot more about this than we do, but that were added. One was the Center for Respite Care. So that was the program that helps provide some medical care for our county's homeless senior citizens. And then another entity called CareStar, which really provides patient navigation services for our seniors here in Hamilton County. And CareStar has worked in conjunction with St. Vincent de Paul with some of those types of navigation services. And then lastly, Center for Closing the Health Gap was the last group that was added, receiving some of the levy funding here for the senior services levy. So overall, our analysis of again, largely the Council on Aging, the senior services levy continues to provide valuable services to our residents. They do it in a very cost-effective type of way. They're financially sound. The delivery of the service is high quality, and they just do a tremendous job for our senior services here our seniors here in Hamilton County. Lastly, and Dr. Herzig's report mentioned this, and it probably bears out in terms of maybe what we should start to look at from this point moving forward. And that is possibly the creation and formation of a strategic planning committee to look at the scope of services that we can and should be providing to our seniors here in Hamilton County, especially given that our population continues to age. It's consistent, I think, probably with any of our levies in Hamilton County, and I think it's part of our policy as TLRC, but to try to look into other ways for increased funding that does not depend on taxes. So if there are other ways to achieve more revenue for these agencies. And then possibly a presentation of a new strategic plan to the community, just helping further educate our county residents in terms of what Council on Aging does as the ESP provider here in Hamilton County. And again, if we're getting older, more and more people need to know that this service is out there. So with that, I will end and be happy to answer any questions or hear any feedback.
Thank you, Mr. Quarry. You had a mouthful for me because the Council on Aging, they are just so awesome. Fortunately or unfortunately, most of my friends are seniors now, so I get a direct impact or in the ear as it relates to services that they're receiving. And you brought up at the end about the transportation element. I am so happy to hear about not only the grant, but that they're looking at transportation, because Suzanne and I talk often, and it's always about transportation. And so the seniors, when they were given a survey about transportation, they said it's pretty good. I don't have any problems. But the real reason for that is because that's all they have. And I think even though it was anonymous, it's like, oh, I'm not going to say all this stuff. And I'm not saying that it's not a good service, but I know the majority of transportation is handled by an out of the country company. So I'm just really happy that they're looking at transportation, because it is really, I get so many calls about that. And then as you talk about their adjustment to this COVID pandemic, and so I was looking at the list of restaurants that they picked up to provide a variety and not just a Meals on Wheels, but those great restaurants. I was looking at the menus that they're providing to be different and also to be better. So I have nothing but great things to say about them. And then as far as the veterans, I think in my mind, are we doing all that we need to do for veterans? And I'm not sure that we are. And I'm going to do really a self-evaluation to look at what we're doing and if we can do more. So I will, I think I took lots of notes, but I think that's all that I have. But kudos to that agency who has a really, as we're all getting older. You said that about, I said, oh, please, I'll get older as you speak. But yeah, it was a great presentation. Thank you for your work and for your committee. I'll open it up, Vice President Reese.
Yes, thanks, Mark, for the presentation. I think the one part that stands out the most is the strategic plan. I certainly think that is, I think, important. As you are saying, we're aging, and the needs are great. And certainly the issue of housing is a big issue for a lot of seniors, being able to get have housing stock that they won't have to leave the county going to other areas, or not be able to afford it. So I'm very interested in that, and then also interested in a council agent has been great, and have done an awesome job, but also looking at some of those grassroots, smaller organizations that they work with and getting some feedback. I know SOACT, Sandra from SOACT does gets a lot of feedback from seniors who, may not be as vocal, but or living in different, conditions that can be better. So yeah, I think having a strategic planning committee would be very helpful for us as we start to looking at a whole housing program right now, putting $40 million into affordable housing. And we talk about that. We also have to include seniors, a lot of them who sell their homes and need, more accessible living, but still want to live independently and want to live a good quality of life, and making sure that we have senior communities that allow for independent living and those kind of things, and then still be able to have all of the services that they need. We have more people now who have to get new knees, new hips, and all of those things, and realize that stairs aren't quite it, or are empty nesters now and don't need as much room. So certainly, I think having our seniors as a part of that conversation, as we are putting these big plans and these big investments out there for the long-term process, I think the strategic plan will be great. And then certainly joining on the issue of our veterans. I always say you can fight for our country and put your life on the line, and then come back home and, are not treated as such. You can't find a place to live. You can't get a good job. You can't, all of those things that we honor our heroes, but I think giving them an opportunity to have a good way of life when they come back home is so important. So I just want to thank you for all the work you've given us a lot. But out of this, I think the next step is that strategic plan, which I think would be very helpful for us as we're talking about now going to the next phase of recovery after COVID. So thank you.
Mhm. Thank you, Commissioner Dreehouse.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Mark. Really appreciate you and the subcommittee and all the work that you guys are doing. I too want to say good things about the Council on Aging, who just does a fantastic job for seniors in this community. And I think during COVID, they were nimble and they adjusted to what they were seeing. Especially with not only Meals on Wheels, but those long-term packages of goods. I delivered a few of those myself with Fatima, and people were just so grateful that Suzanne was really thinking out of the box as to what people needed. So thanks for recognizing when we had public hearings related to this levy, we heard a lot about respite care, and we heard a lot about care for the caregiver. And the navigation services that seniors needed. And so we tried to respond through this levy to that concern. So I understand the idea that they haven't been on the ground for very long, but I'll look forward to a more robust report next year as they've put in more time through these contracts. So lastly, I just want to also comment on the strategic plan. I think it's a great idea, especially if you're going to find private funding to fund some of these services. I did note that, Mark. So no obligation to do that, but I think that's a great idea. Again, I mean, where I was saying that on all three, kind of take the burden off the taxpayers with these levies, and see if there's a creative way to start to fund some of these services outside just the levy process. So I compliment and think that's a great idea, and I'll look forward to that moving forward as you guys pull that together.
Mhm. Thank you. I remember reading some of the statistics that Suzanne had generated during the pandemic, and the numbers had gone up, which shows that people know about the Council on Aging. And one thing we know, seniors can talk quite a bit. And while they are, even though they're lonely, they still have to go to their medical services like dialysis or whatever. And so when it comes up, where do I go to get help? And the Council of Aging, on Aging. So I remember seeing the numbers were going up, the ones that they were impacting. So that's a great thing, considering they were not able to be among each other in a social way. So people know about it, but of course, more people need to know about it. Okay, well, I want to thank all of you, including Lisa, and then Gwen. I also would like to thank you for being the chair of these great people and reporting and telling them how to do it and everything. So, but they did a great job, and I thank you for your service for sure. Would you like to have some closing words?
Well, I would just like to say the work is continuing, it's ongoing. And it was very enlightening for all the committee members to look at this mid-cycle, where we are and where we're going, how we're going to move forward. All of the agencies that we have reviewed and discussed and shared with you today are very actively continuing to work. It's ongoing. And as you all three know, most of those services are mandated by the state as well. So they're doing an excellent job on trying to stretch the budget to the best of their ability. And all of the agencies, and especially the senior services levies, they have initiated some aggressive campaigning and communicating so that the goal is to keep our seniors in their home. So that means looking at agencies that can provide or come to the home to help them get through, let's say, post-operatively, any issues or needs that they may have. So the three committee members have just done a fantastic job. And we are so glad that you all have taken the time to listen to our results and our recommendations as well.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Look forward to seeing you guys again. Lisa looks like she wants.
Add very quickly, the work of the tax levy committee is not fully done this year. We do have a midterm of the zoo levy that is ongoing right now, as well as a deep dive in the tax levy policy that hasn't been updated since '09. Some advice and recommendations for the commissioners to take on that policy, as well as the big children's services levy, which is being reviewed right now. In fact, we're all going to log off and jump on at 3 o'clock onto a tax levy committee call when the consultants are going to present their report and recommendations on the children's services levy. If anyone wants to view that report, as well as any of these midterm reports, they are all live on the county's website under the TLRC, just hamiltoncounty.ohio.org hamiltoncounty.ohio.gov/TLRC will take you right to them, as well as the links for the schedule and Zoom meetings.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, our next item on the agenda is parental leave policy and resolution to modify the personnel policy manual. Frank Spataro is going to lead the discussion.
Good afternoon, Commissioners.
Good afternoon.
Bridget Doherty is going to help me a little bit here by posting the revision. We last discussed this April 20th, and you gave me some direction on a couple of changes that you requested, which I have made. The first change is on page 2 in D1, and that concerns in the event that an employee would have unexpectedly have custody of a child under the age of 18 and had used their 2 instances of paid parental leave, that there's a ability to have an additional period of paid parental leave based on the circumstances. So I don't believe that this would hopefully won't occur often, but in the event it did, we've provided a provision for that for an employee to qualify for that. The other major change is we eliminated the payback, which was at the very end of the policy. I believe it was at the end on the return to work. It was 0.3, and it required an employee to pay back a certain amount if they left county employment within 12-month period.
Oh, it's happening.
And after
Still on the agenda, but I don't have no idea when we probably follow this.
Hello?
So we eliminated the payback period since it was, we determined it was really unreasonable to expect somebody that was out of work basically to pay back the wages that they had received under the parental leave. So those really summarize the major changes, and then I've prepared a resolution to modify section 5.10 in the personnel policy manual to make this effective.
Okay, thank you, Frank. Is there anything, so you'll include that in the personnel manual? Is there anything that we need to do as a commission?
Well, the resolution will require your approval, and the current adoption leave program that's in the personnel manual, that's the current section 5.1. This will replace that. So the resolution states that upon adoption of this policy, the parental leave policy, the adoption policy will no longer apply.
Okay, so is it your plan to have this to us for our next regular meeting?
It's the resolution's dated for the June 17th meeting.
Okay, very good. And thank you for including, I had some concerns that were included, so I appreciate that. I'll open it up for my colleagues if they had any questions or comments. Vice President Reese.
Sorry. No, I don't have any comments. I think the things that we had talked about have been included, so I'm fine with it. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Dreehouse.
Thank you. Yeah, I just want to say that I think this is a really big deal for Hamilton County to be changing our parental leave policy to reflect a more open attitude towards our employees, young employees, people that want to come work for the county, people that are starting young families, and to have these kinds of benefits for those individuals, I think is just a huge deal as we continue to try to make Hamilton County the most welcoming place to work that we can. So thanks to staff, this came in front of us. I don't remember when, it's been a few months back. And the changes that Frank just read off reflect some of the concerns that we raised collectively. And so thank you for responding to that, Frank. You are right. We don't want to penalize people for taking advantage of our policy and then losing their job perhaps, or having more than one occasion to use this in a year's time. So I really appreciate the flexibility, but what we are doing, and I think we've all talked about how we want to make sure people feel welcome in Hamilton County. I just think this is a huge step towards that objective. And I just want to compliment staff for working rigorously on this and getting it in front of us.
Thank you.
Can I mention there's one additional piece of work that needs to be done that's referenced in the resolution, and that is I will send each of the since we have the adoption policy in virtually all of our collective bargaining agreements, and we're replacing it with this policy. I'll be putting together a memoranda of understanding for each of the bargaining units to adopt this policy as part of the respective collective bargaining agreements. Okay,
thank you. And thank you, Frank, for your work and for your staff as it relates to this parental leave policy. Thank you, Commissioner Dreehouse, for bringing up, shining a light on this resolution, because oftentimes when we do things and think outside of the box, it looks good. You added what we needed, and we thank Frank for it, but it is a big deal that we're doing things, our board is doing things differently than other political entities. So thank you for drawing attention to that. Okay. All righty. Thank you very much. We'll move forward. Our next item on the agenda is strategy for expanding the effort of reaching people of high risk not vaccinated, the Cancer Justice Network. Dr. Robert Harris is on here with two other gentlemen. I'm not sure who's going to lead the discussion. I heard Steve Sunderland earlier. Steve, are you on there? Would you like to get started? Robert is also there. You need to unmute.
I'm trying, but it
Okay.
says the host has,
Okay, we hear you now.
oh, great. Thank you. I think my colleagues are trying to get on as well. I don't know who the host is, but,
Okay.
oh, I see. Okay.
Okay.
Hello there.
Hello there. Could we unmute?
Thank you for welcoming us to have a chance to talk with you about this important topic. We are the Cancer Justice Network. My colleague, the chair of our board, Robert Harris, is struggling to get on, and Nemat Mousavian is our medical director, our physician, and Steve Gibbs is one of our directors of our organization. We are deeply committed to reaching out to the community that is high risk to get them vaccinated, and to do this through a process that we've developed over the last few years called navigation. So we have attempted to work in low-income communities throughout the city, through churches, through senior centers, through health fairs, and we have tried to provide a navigation through transportation provided by Cincinnati Area Senior Services and by Lyft and Uber. So we have tried to identify people and say, we will accompany you to a vaccination. We will accompany you to a health exam. We know that prior to the COVID, we had a major health problem in the city in terms of cancer. We are the cancer capital of Ohio for low-income people, for minorities, for high-risk people. So we were working on navigation and transportation at that time. Once the COVID hit, we began, and once the vaccinations became available, we became involved in that experience as well. So we are now navigating people, and we would like to develop a process where that we could have in each neighborhood health champions, people who would go in neighborhoods with us to build trust in that neighborhood, so that we could provide even more access to both vaccinations and to any health problem that that person may have. Distrust about the vaccination spreads out into distrust about going to the hospital, getting a primary care provider, going to a health center. We know that distrust is the factor we've got to work on. Once we've done that, we've been successful in bringing over 300 people a week to cancer exams, to dental exams. Poor people want to get their health care, but they are terrified of the way that they've been treated in healthcare, and they've been terrified of the possibility of bills they can't control. Some of the things that you've mentioned already in the other discussions that have gone on. We see isolation and we see mortality. The death rate amongst this population is just unbelievable. We see massive death rates in the senior population from the COVID, and we see it also in the minority population as well, where 2 or 3 times the number of deaths are happening in the minority community. This can be prevented, but we've got to take action on the ground with navigators that reach out. And we're doing this right now. This coming Thursday at the Homeless Coalition, we will be trying to provide vaccinations to people thanks to the great work of Dr. Melba Moore and the health department. We're going to provide that. And we're going to provide a hot meal to people who come as well. We're going to build in an attractive, welcoming environment for them. So we need support to really expand our activities, to be able to reach out to the community, not in a in any way other than a direct way. So our 12 navigators can be a part of building neighborhood strength to take this vaccination seriously. So I know our medical director or board chair, Dr. Robert Harris, would like to say a word if they're on. I don't know whether they're on.
I see that.
I'm available. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All righty. What Steve said is absolutely correct. And what he has been doing has been just marvelous over the years. And we have managed to utilize all types of funding and are looking for some more because we know that the issues are out there. We know that the need is out there. I myself personally, I have had a disability that has prevented me from being able to walk or being able to use my left arm and hand, but I've been blessed to be able to work all of these years, and I'm happy to know all of you commissioners, you know, the president, the vice president, you know, do what all you can do to understand and to know and to act upon the fact that we need your help and that we will not stop. We have not stopped, and we don't know how to stop. And I know you don't know how to stop. And so I'm proud of each and every one of you, especially you. You are strong women. You're strong proponents of justice, of changing lives of people for the better. And so thank you, thank you, thank you. And then again, my heart goes out to Steve Gibbs, to my friend Steve Sunderland, a great Dr. Sunderland, to Nemat Mousavian, and to whomever else I might be missing, and to please do whatever you can do to just keep on keeping on and to understand, as I know you understand, because you're here and giving us this opportunity to speak on behalf of people who unfortunately sometimes literally cannot speak for themselves. So whatever you can do, please continue to do. Whatever we can do, we're going to do that. You just saw a few people moving around in back of me. That's because I work with several other groups, all of which are involved in trying to help people get an education and to just simply be human beings and be recognized as viable human beings. So back into your hands, Chair, Director. I'm the chairman. There's the director, Steve Sunderland. Doctor, I'll give it back to you to direct us. Is our friend Dr. Nemat, is he available?
I see him on the screen, but he's muted.
Yes, Steve, did Steve hang up? Or I know he's there, I see him.
I
So
see
I don't know if you
Steve.
can hear me or not.
Mhm.
Commissioner, can I answer any questions for you?
Let me say a few words to relate what we're doing to other earlier presentations that you guys have heard.
Mhm.
The primary source of operating funds for Cancer Justice Network is the FTA Section 5310 program, which is the same source of money that the Council on Aging has used to create its new Home 52 dispatch system, which you guys discussed earlier. We are ourselves not an operator of vans, but we do contract with Cincinnati area senior services to provide van services to vaccination sites. And lately, what we've been doing is a lot of Uber and Lyft transportation for people, because as you probably know, vaccination sites have been fleeting. They appear and disappear with great speed. And sometimes if you're trying to get a homeless person from a library lobby to a vaccination site and you've got an hour and a half to do it, and COA and CAS need a day or 3 days of lead time to get a van out there. Lyft is the only way to do it. So our niche in this whole situation is the very, very poor, homeless, largely living outdoors, whom we transport and provide navigator services to in a fashion that is slotted in below the agencies that you've been discussing here earlier.
Mhm. Thank you. Did you also want Nemat? I can't pronounce his last name.
Mousavian.
Mousavian. Did you also like for him to say a few words?
If he can get in, that would be wonderful. But He has been our physician in every one of our situations that we are at a church or a senior service center or a health fair. He has really provided us with a medical backup and will be with us in every one of the vaccination events where he can fit it into his schedule as well. We are trying to communicate to people in our community that they are entitled to a vaccination, that healthcare is a right for them as well, and that they can trust us. And they've known us in working with the different churches throughout the community. They've known us because we've been at senior centers with them. They've known us because we've been at health fairs with them. So we want to now build on that and make sure that we can bring them with us so that in the next 30 days, we can see a dramatic increase in the number of people who are actually getting the vaccinations, not just wondering about it or saying, well, maybe we'll wait a little longer. We want to have people have a good dinner with us. Let's say on Thursday at the Homeless Coalition, we want them to pick up their checks, but we also want them to have their vaccinations. And that's what we're committed to. And we think that the great commissioners that you are, that you would want to support this effort that's on the ground. We are in the trenches in this city trying to do that. And we are excited about doing it. We're really happy about it. We'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much. And I'm excited about the work that all of you are doing. As you know, the American Rescue Plan, we're in the midst of looking at a draft of where allocation of funding should go. For you guys to be on the front end, just since you were not part of the public hearing, you certainly can send an email soliciting our ear and also how we may be able to help you and what you think you'd like to have to be more efficient. I was going to ask a question until Steve gave the answer about currently your funding and where that's coming from. He just answered that through the FDA. But I would certainly encourage all of you to send an email to the county, and we will all three get that email for consideration as we look at allocation. I will go to Vice President Reese if she has any comments or questions.
Thank you, Madam President, and thank you all for the work that you're doing. And good to see you again. Good to see you again, Robert. And you're doing some very, very important work. I would, I concur with that the email, but also if there may be some partnerships that we're already working on. I don't know if you're, I know you have a doctor on here, if they're partnering any kind of way, if there might be some opportunity with the health collaborative, because I know everyone is trying to work to get the harder to serve population. There may be some synergy there. I'm not sure, Jeff, connecting them with the health collaborative too, because I know there's still some funding there, and they're working now, I guess, on a plan also to get out that we've already funded. That has to be used by, I think, the end of this year. So there may be some opportunity for partnership there from the short term. Obviously, from the longer term, the email is important. And for me, obviously, the shot is very important. But one of the things that our board has been talking about, and the reason, even with the mobile bus, we wanted to go beyond, the shot, is that the issue of health disparities are going to, they continue, and there are a lot. We got COVID, but cancer is really, taking people out. Everybody has someone, a family member. I know is very dear to me. I lost my mother to breast cancer, and certainly have relatives, others who went down for other types of cancer, prostate cancer, et cetera. So there may be some opportunity to focus in on some of these other health disparities. I know that we have said that we want to make sure that, when COVID is behind us, and I love to hear that word, but I love saying that, when it's behind us, I can't wait to that day. But when it's behind us, people were dying before COVID for health disparities, and they will continue if we don't, really step up. And I think now, so many others now know that public health is so important. I think that's the biggest lesson that a lot of people got from COVID, that you know, without your health, the health could shut the whole world down, as COVID did. So maybe I'd love to see the email, but maybe there's some synergies there as we look at the American Rescue investment in the future. And that investment, I know that for me, and I speak for myself, is that health disparities has to be a top priority. And I would love to do more with cancer. If we're number one with cancer, that's one thing I think, no matter what your party affiliation is, your race, your gender, I think that's one thing we could agree on, is that we've got to come together and fight this cancer. This cancer is taking us out. And even though the focus has been on COVID, we can't forget that cancer has wiped out just so many people. So I'd love to get that email as well and look at ways in which maybe we can partner on something dealing with cancer as we move forward, health disparities, and then maybe getting in touch with Jeff and our administration for what type of partnerships that you might be able to do now, because I think people are all looking for someone to partner with to help get more people with these shots. And I know we have some money that's left over there. Maybe that might be a place. We never know, but I always love to try to connect people with partnerships if possible. So thank you for your presentation.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Definitely, thank you. Thank all of you. This has just been a wonderful opportunity. And I look forward, I've worked with all of you in the past, and I look forward to working with you in the present and in the future, because we can lick this thing if we do what we can do, which is to all work and stay together. And so once again, I say to you all, thank you, and keep on keeping on.
Yes. We're not done with you guys yet, though. Hold on for a second, Commissioner Driehaus.
Well, we're not done yet. We'll stay as long as you like.
Robert, you're stealing my thunder, man. What are you doing?
Right. Can I just interject, though? Vice President Reese brought up a great point when I talked about the email, but as she said, there's monies that are available now that you don't have to, I can't say that I'm going to give it to you, but the commission would have to agree on that. But there's monies that are available now where possibly you won't have to wait till our decisions on the American Rescue Plan is going on. So, Commissioner Driehaus.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here. It's good to see everyone. And thanks for the work that you're doing in the community to connect people with healthcare. It's really important. So a couple of things occur to me. Yeah, we do have some funds. We do and will have some funds available. So I would encourage you, we've got this 513 relief website where if you sign up and check the boxes in the areas that you work in, then you get a notification as to when those funds become available. So for instance, nonprofit funding will be coming available after we pass, presuming we put money there, and I feel like we will, then there may be an opportunity there for some funding for your organization in general. But I note that you mentioned Melba Moore and the good work that she's doing in as a health commissioner in the city. I don't know if you've done a lot of work outside the city, but Greg Kesterman, the health commissioner for the county, is always looking for partnerships. And his jurisdiction is the area outside the city other than Springdale and Norwood. And so I would encourage you to reach out to Hamilton County Public Health I know there are populations out there that you guys are serving, and see if there's a potential partnership there. It's very similar to what the kind of partnership you have with Commissioner Moore, because Greg is always looking not only to connect people to the vaccine, but also set up vaccine clinics in areas where people have not availed themselves to the vaccine because they just can't get there, or they don't know about it. Or like you said, it was there yesterday, but it's not there tomorrow, And so he is anxious to set up, pop-ups wherever it's most valuable for the community. So if you guys have work that's going on outside the city jurisdiction in the Hamilton County jurisdiction, I'm sure he would be all ears trying to help set up and get people vaccinated. So thanks again for presenting today. It's really been helpful.
And I see that Namat Mousavian, he's on there twice. So and he's unmuted on one. So I was wondering, are you able to hear us? Are you able to speak right now? Okay, well, we tried, but I know what the gist of it would be because you've been working with these great men. I'm thinking all the work that you guys are doing, you're making us look like slackers. I mean,
No,
you
no,
guys, you guys are out there doing it directly. And so I just thank you from the board and the commission for all the lives that you're impacting. So thank you so very much.
Well, thank you as well. And it was wonderful seeing Commissioner Driehaus at the Santa Maria Health Fair, and Commissioner Reese, we've seen you a lot in the past as well. And we hope that mobile van idea comes into being. And we are so happy to meet with you as well, Madam President.
Thank you so much.
Commissioner, can I say a few words?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, hi, this is Neemad Musavian. Good afternoon. Do you hear me? Do you hear me?
We can hear you.
Yes.
Do you hear me?
We can hear you.
Yeah, I hear myself. Well, what I'm saying is that, as Dr. Sunderland and Mr. Harris said, we are seeing a large group of people. I don't know, I have an echo.
We do too, but it's okay.
But anyway, now, do you hear me now?
Yes.
Hello?
I can hear you.
Now, I can hear you now. I don't know what's going on here.
Go ahead, Dr. Musavian. We hear
I'm
you.
sorry.
We can hear you. Oh, we got a picture and
Now we
everything.
can see
I
you.
see you are talking, your lips moving, but I don't hear the voice.
We can hear you though. You can keep talking.
Actually, I'm
Keep
so
on talking.
anxious to say a few words.
Oh, Madam President, it's because he was on there twice, so I had to remove the one that wasn't
Do you
speaking.
hear me?
So,
Yes,
Yeah.
we can hear you.
Go
We
ahead,
hear
Dr.
you.
Musavian.
I hope to get there. I don't know.
You can just keep talking because we can hear you. Maybe you can.
We can hear you and we can see you.
Yeah, it is good. It is good. Well, good afternoon to all of you, and I apologize for all these problems.
It's okay.
Anyway, as Mr. Harris and Dr. Sunderland mentioned, we are dealing with a large number of people homeless, and there are a lot of problems. I just want to mention these people that we see, they basically have no health care at all, very, very minimal. And they are having a lot of problems with things like diabetes, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, high lipids, and no housing, of course, and a very poor nutrition. As a physician, I have dealt with them even before we start Cancer Justice Network. And it is really, it breaks your heart that in this country with so much wealth, and this kind of people should be limited like that. It is totally actually disastrous. But what we are trying under the leadership of Dr. Sunderland and Mr. Harris and Mr. Gibbs, we are trying to do whatever we can. But like you were talking about cancer and aging, which many years ago I worked with them, I like to have some comprehensive plan. If I'm sure you could help us a lot, and I appreciate that you already offered that you could help us financially. But really, this is America, and I always say it's really shame that we have this kind of population around the country. They are deprived of everything, and we are really reaching out to you because I know you are like a group of angels here that help these people to the best that you can. And this is why we said it would be imperative for us to join you. And I appreciate so much that you allow us to participate in your meeting today. But there are a lot of problems, and we appreciate any help that you give us. And the mortality, as you know, in this part of the Ohio is so high, almost highest in the country. I mean, that's the statistic that I get from Center for Disease Control. And I mean, it is so sad. The other thing is people who run for offices, nobody talk about these people. starting from any state seat, go all the way to White House. When they are running, when they have the campaign, nobody mentioned these people as if they are not existing here. And the other thing is, people from outside the US, when they hear that there's such a big segment of population here, they cannot believe it. When I tell them, they say that I'm lying. They said, in America, those people live. I mean, did you hear see what happened at Los Angeles a few weeks ago? These homeless people were attacking everything because they are desperate. They don't get anything. So we appreciate that you are willing to work with us. And it is really, it's opened a great gate for us and a new day for us. And I don't know how to thank you, but I appreciate greatly, and God bless you all.
Thank you so much. You guys are just a powerful group. And so we've been called a lot of things, but you say we're a group of angels. We will take it. That's for sure. Thank you so much. But you guys are the angels. So we will do all we can to help move this effort forward. So thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, we will move forward to item number 4, another angel, Jeff Aludo, to discuss, the American Rescue Plan update and board discussion. Jeff, take it away.
There is a first time for everything, I guess, so thanks. Just a brief synopsis, Madam President. We, as you are aware, the administration forwarded a concept plan to the Board of County Commissioners several weeks ago to start the conversation on how to go about allocating dollars received through the American Rescue Plan, the second round of stimulus from the federal government. That concept plan included elements of strengthening our health systems, in addressing negative economic impacts, stabilizing county finances, and enhancing infrastructure. We held multiple stakeholder meetings with defined stakeholders in the community across all of these different areas. We held 2 public hearings last week. The goal was to wrap those public hearings up by the beginning of June, which we were successful in doing with the board, and now move to the portion of the process where we are looking for feedback and input from the board based upon comments that we collectively have heard, treating this very much like the budget process, where the administration will take those comments and thoughts from the board and come back to the commission with a document and a proposed plan that meets the policy objectives of the board. So with that, I know, Madam President, that Bridget is prepared to share the slides that show the different areas of the concept plan. We don't have to, she's doing it. I was going to say we don't have to, but if it would be helpful just for conversation purposes. But at this point, I just turn it over to the board for any thoughts and guidance. We are continuing to receive some input from stakeholders, either through the public hearing process, or as we just had a discussion earlier in staff meeting, others who may not have been able to make it onto public hearings, et cetera, who are providing us some input that we are looking to look for the right channels for them to be involved in one of these categories as we move forward. So with that, Madam President, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Jeff. I think with the leave of our commission colleagues that we go through just a short overview of what you had on the screen for whoever did not see it before.
Sure.
A review.
Yeah, happy to. So again, the 4 categories of the concept plan submitted by the administration. Again, this relates to the allocation of the $158 million in American Rescue Plan funding that will be received by the county. The first $79 million of which has been received. Those categories are strengthening public health infrastructure, stabilizing county finances and operations, addressing negative economic impacts, and enhancing community infrastructure. Bridget? Under strengthening our public health systems, this is a category for addressing numerous areas, primarily making sure that, and we have $6 million devoted to strengthening our long-term community resiliency, making sure that we are allocating dollars so that in the future, if something like this were to happen again from a public health perspective, the public can look back and say that these dollars were used to make sure that we are better prepared to weather that storm if it should come again. So this would involve heavy work with our local health districts and with our private health systems to make sure that we are addressing critical areas of community need as it relates to the resiliency in the public health network in this community, as well as behavioral health, mental health, and substance abuse. We heard that earlier as we were walking through the mental health levy mid-cycle review, but we know that these needs have been exacerbated to an extreme effect here during COVID. We also have dollars allocated to address the disproportionately impacted communities in the county, and making sure that we are getting health and other benefits out into those communities to make sure that those needs are addressed again, as those needs have been worsened through COVID. And we also specifically have dollars in here to assist the city and the county with the effort to move the gun range from Evendale out just outside of Lincoln Heights. Bridget? We have dollars in the concept plan for stabilizing county finances, including $20 million of revenue replacement that we're recommending. We passed through for some capital projects, primarily related to public safety and continued infrastructure investment on the banks, as well as facility capital improvements, the investment in a satellite office to help get county services out into the population of Hamilton County, again, particularly as it relates to addressing needs of vulnerable and disproportionately impacted populations. We have dollars set aside to address the compensation of public safety staff and the portion of their job that remains tied to the response to COVID-19 here in the county. We have dollars set aside for premium pay for, in particular, for county workers who over the past year have been in a position where by the nature of their job, they have been put into direct contact with either individuals or situations where the threat of COVID, contracting COVID was higher. So the American Rescue Plan allows for premium pay dollars to be allocated in that manner. We have some dollars put aside for county staffing to implement the grant, as well as funding for EMA operations to ensure that we can continue distributing personal protective equipment, warehousing that equipment, warehousing vaccine, et cetera. Bridget? We have a significant amount of funding set aside for addressing negative economic impacts of COVID, significantly in the area of housing, the production, preservation, and protection of housing. We have money set aside for mortgage assistance, we have dollars set aside for helping with workforce development, in particular, workforce development as it relates to getting people back into the workforce and addressing the barriers to getting people off the sidelines and back into the workforce, including things like addressing childcare. We have dollars set aside for nonprofit assistance, for some strategic allocations to help small minority businesses with back office functions, which is something that we heard a lot through the stakeholder sessions, that this might be a more strategic and transformative way of helping energize the pathways of small minority businesses into second stage companies. We have dollars set aside for another traditional round of small business assistance, hospitality industry support through the CVB, and arts and cultural assistance as well. Bridget? And finally, we have dollars as specifically allowed by the American Rescue Plan. We have dollars set aside to address infrastructure, quality of service, as well as the affordability of broadband infrastructure in Hamilton County, as well as dollars set aside for addressing some strategic sewer and stormwater flooding issues throughout the county. And I believe that is the last slide, Bridget, but that, Madam President, that is a brief overview of the topics and what we had presented to the board in the concept plan. Again, that concept plan is available. The entire narrative, which is about 20 pages or so, is available on our website. If you go to our website, hamiltoncounty.ohio.gov, you'll find a link to that concept plan. And we're at the portion of this process now where we are prepared to take continued guidance and thoughts from the board so that we can go back and come back to the board in mid-June with a revised plan that the board can approve with finality so that we can begin the implementation process.
Hey, thank you very much, Jeff. I thought it was good to have another review because next week we will not be having our regular meetings.
Correct.
So I thought it was good to do it now. And I would ask the board if we could have to Jeff by June the 14th, which is a Monday, any additions, deletions, corrections, anything you'd like to add to this draft. And then therefore, hopefully Jeff and his staff can incorporate it for our meeting on the 15th. That would be great if we were able to do that. So I will open it up now for any other comments, Vice President Reese.
Madam President, I just want to make sure I understand. Are we talking about what we would like to include in this now? Or are we waiting to the 14th?
Oh, if you'd like to say it now, you certainly can. I'm just saying as far as putting it in writing, if Jeff's office can have it by the 14th. Yeah. So you're certainly welcome to do that.
Okay. Can I ask if you come back to me? I've got my briefcases over
Sure.
there and I need to walk away from to grab
No.
my notes out. So
Yeah.
just come back.
No
to me.
problem. Yeah.
Thank you. Sorry.
Commissioner Dreehouse.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, I just wanted to, first of all, thank everybody that participated in the public hearings. I thought we heard from a nice cross section of the community, and I think they reminded us of all the emergent needs that still exist out there and the desire for us to do some transformational work with this money as well. So really, I think the recommendation of the administrator was on target on those fronts. So I kind of taking the what still needs to be done approach in addition to the long-term transformational approach. So I thought that played out in the public hearings as well. A couple things that are just on my mind, and I will get my ideas in writing to the administration. I'm hoping to do it before the end of the week, just to, keep things rolling here. So we heard some things from a lot of nonprofits about the work that they're doing and the impact of COVID to their budgets and their increased workloads. And so I want to note that I've been thinking through that related to the administrator's recommendation, and how those, how the need plays with the number here and some of the other things that are funded under the addressing negative economic impacts bucket, the third bucket. Just looking at some of those dollars, I've asked Jeff about, we've got a third round of small business assistance going out right now. And so this represents a fourth round of small business assistance. I'm just thinking through when we will know how many folks took advantage of the third round in order to inform us what we need to do in a fourth round. And then we heard a lot from the arts and culture community too, and what a big hit they've taken because they've been shut down during COVID, and wondering about the dollar amount there as well. So I'm just sharing thoughts more than anything. I haven't committed anything to writing. I was very encouraged by the long-term transformational kind of approach to housing and childcare and workforce. I think that's appropriate, and I think we need to do that, knowing that a lot of the money for housing will be kind of that long-term, how can we start to address housing needs, whether it's seniors or people with disabilities or affordable housing, no matter what it is. But yet we've got this $5 million for mortgage assistance, which is immediate and will help people stay in their homes right away. So I thought that was a very good approach. And I think we heard about that too in the public hearing. A couple other smaller things. We heard a lot about suicide prevention in the public hearings and the need for mental health services. So that's captured also in the first bucket. And so I just don't know if we would like, similar to what we did in the CARES Act Commissioner Dumas, you'll remember that we highlighted domestic violence in that and wanted to make sure that some of the funding was set aside for domestic violence work for our DIVERT program. I wonder, I'm just, again, thinking out loud, if we want to do that with suicide prevention, given what we heard and what we know about young people struggling in our community. So I'm thinking through that. And then I've recently received some emails about economic development, not so much related to small business assistance, but rather a more transformational look at economic development, and whether it is site readiness work or just thinking through how to reinvigorate the economy, both at the small and kind of the forward-thinking level. And so I'm not really, again, not fully flushed out ideas here, but thinking through an economic development piece of this as well, outside of the support we're doing for small businesses. So those are some of the things that I think we heard, and at least that's what I heard, and what I'll be reacting to in a memo to Administrator Ludo. And I will make sure that as we do this, and if you'll provide the deference too, I would love to see what everybody else is thinking related to the administrator's recommendation, some of the ideas that are percolating in both of your offices, and start to kind of share those documents through our chiefs of staff, or maybe just conversations about what's bubbling up related to this plan before we pass it.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Reese.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Madam President. And I too will have a formal memo that will be helpful. First of all, let me just say, I want to thank the administration. This is great. I think we have a great document in terms of the buckets that are there, and putting funding in the various buckets, which helps us. And so I think some of the things that we may have or might be some tweaks based on what we've heard from citizens, but certainly not far off from, I think, at least for me, not far off from some of the things I think is important. Obviously, the housing, the capital improvements, and public safety, small business, workforce, all of those things, so important. Just a couple of things that I wanted to make sure, and I think the way we're putting the housing, it gives us time to really map it out. We're put the money there, but we don't have to decide today how that is going to move forward, because that in itself, I think, is a complex component that we've got to make sure that we're able to deal with the complexity of the issues of housing. However, I do think that there are people who are faced with emergency issues as far as staying in their house, just like rental assistance. And then let me take a step back and say, those who are watching maybe for the first time, rental assistance is not in here because we already have the rental assistance money. So it's not a knock to rental assistance. But just like it's an emergency to pay your rent, it is an emergency for a lot of people to pay their mortgages. So wanted to make sure that as we're looking at a longer term plan with housing, that the mortgage assistance component, it is noted as a right now. So I'd like to see how much money we want to put toward that and get that started. Unfortunately, it seems to take a very long time for us to get RFPs and contracts done. This is a third entity. I've been to city to state, and the county seems to be a little bit longer, even like with small businesses. We voted on it, but it hasn't gone out yet. So that I think should be a top priority, because there are so many people right now who are facing foreclosure, an issue that me and Commissioner Driehaus worked on. We were at the state trying to keep people in. So I think pulling that, how much of that we want to pull out is critical. I don't know what that number is, but I think that should be separate from having affordable housing developed and all those kind of things, that there should be an emergency housing fund that people can tap into as soon as we pass it and get the signatures signed and who's going to implement it. But I think that needs to be a top priority. That is a 911 for so many people who are hanging on by a thread to keep their homes. So somehow if that could be pulled out. I also think that some dollars, and I talked with Jeff about this, but some dollars we still are getting rules on these dollars, and we were looking at what might be able to be eligible as it relates to the issue of property taxes. A lot of people are losing their homes because of the property taxes. The property tax is higher than the mortgage. A lot of seniors are losing their homes because of it. And so if they're, I know we're looking and waiting and trying to get more clarity. I don't want to get the clarity to come in and we don't have any money set aside. So some of these dollars, not spending every single cent, but something that's put aside that if it comes back and say we can do this, then we as a board at least would have the flexibility, the option to be able to say we have funding for it. Because I think that is a big issue. Also looking at a utility relief. There needs to be a utility relief component. Yes, we do have it under rental assistance where you could get your gas and electric, but also I'd like to include your water and your sewer under the utility relief to see if there is a utility relief component that will help not just definitely seniors, but one of the issues that we find with COVID is just people who work every day who, just got hit with COVID financially. There's no program for them. If you're not extremely poor, then you had no help. If you were so-called middle class, working class, there was nothing for you. And that's what the COVID Relief CARES dollars allowed us to do, is to be able to help people in that category as well. So would like to see a utility relief component if possible. Of course, we have the small business issue with grants, marketing, and technical assistance and navigators. Food stability is still, making sure that is still an issue. I like the fact we've got the broadband Wi-Fi. I like the fact we got we did a smaller grant just now. Some of the smaller municipalities are, they'll be announced soon that they can get started. And now we've got the American Rescue money coming to help them to expand. I want us to be a smart county. And we saw that with COVID, that a lot of us, we just weren't ready. We weren't ready for what hit us. And if it wasn't for Zoom, we would have been out of business, a lot of us. And then employment, I like to really pull out a youth component. One of the things that certainly I heard a lot of when I was campaigning, and certainly something when I was at the city, I always was pushing youth employment. We always made sure 2,000 young people were employed. We got to the state, they tried to cut the budget, and we made a plea to the governor, and I told the governor that our program has to get to the youth before the street program does. There will be a program, and it's better to be our program to save our youth. And so really want to look at a real, something that is youth development and employment. That would be a real plan, not just we contract out to a bunch of people. I want to see something that is a focus for us. And we have an opportunity to do this no matter what your income is. Yes, if you're low income, okay. But also if you're a student and you come out and your family's not low income, but you need to get a job, I'd like to see us have a focus on youth development and recreating something like a CCY. CCY was something that so many people came out of, came back, we had internships with, was able to be leaders. So you had all these people that have a history of coming out of CCY, and it really many stories about how it changed their lives. Seeing something like that at the county level, maybe partnering with all of our cities and municipalities. I think we have an opportunity for that. Health disparities, I've mentioned that before, with a focus on some of the key disparities, cancer obviously being one of them. And then we heard, like Commissioner Driehaus said, we heard a lot about mental health. And one of the things I want to make sure with mental health is a lot of times we do a bucket and we get a contract with a big organization, and that's good and dandy. But we want to make sure also that these smaller grassroots organizations, maybe through the big organizations, that they're able to get these smaller ones. I think Hope for Grant. I think we heard from a mother who child committed suicide, and she started an organization, and we heard a couple people that had testimony. They may be a smaller organization, and I want them to be also able to access whatever we put forward, access it, where it's not just the bigger organizations and the smaller ones who are at the grassroots level don't have an opportunity. So I don't know if we have to have the money and then say so much will be for smaller organizations like we do for villages. But I'd like to see some of the smaller organizations have access to this as well. And then my last, it's not my last thing, but I'll stop here. I certainly, this month is a lot of things. It's Pride Month. This month we will have Juneteenth, and Commissioner Driehaus, we gave a resolution that we passed for having the flags all month. Commissioner Dumas last year introduced a motion for Juneteenth to be, for the first time ever, a holiday. And this is also Black Music Month in June. It's been for many, many years. And we have a large history in our city and in our region of that. And so I'd like to see, I know it's in there as a development, but I'd like to see it be a part of our capital project, a cultural inclusion, a cultural music inclusion project on the banks, where we would create a music corridor on the banks, where you have Paul Brown Stadium, which hosts the Cincinnati Music Festival. Some people know it as the Jazz Festival. I still call it the Jazz Festival, which is the largest economic impact before COVID every single year for us. $107 million that brings to our coffers from these artists that come and bring people from all over, book our hotels, park in our garages, all kind of tax money that we bring, hotel tax. The hotels are even more expensive that weekend. And then the Andrew Brady Music Icon Center that we just got a chance to walk through. And then having that corner be a music walk of fame that honors the history of African-American music, which has been the birth of so many other genres of music. So, you know, we could go on, we could list, you know, Isley Brothers, Bootsy Collins, Leontine Price, who was an opera singer. So many people don't know she's from here. And so many others, the list goes on. But having that as part of a way to bring tourism to that corridor, bring people down, get hotels booked, and park in our garages, bringing money back. So I see that as we look at the banks from Paul Brown Stadium to Great American Park and everything in between, I see this as a cultural inclusion project that is on the banks. And every quarter we get the funding of what we're doing on the banks, how much money we're spending. In fact, I think this week we've got some more projects. We got the development projects on the banks. And when we look at those numbers, one time we had a number of $16 million for upkeep, and minority businesses only got $1,400. My women-owned businesses got zero. So this, I think, would be one cultural inclusion, which is so desperately needed on the banks, that would also bring in money to our coffers. So those are some of the things that I see that under the area of tourism. I see it under the area of inclusion, and certainly under the area of a music corridor, which I think would be huge that we could promote. So that's what I see under infrastructure as well. So those are just some of the things, Madam President, looking forward to putting all these things together in writing. But I do think that we are certainly going from a good foundation that the administration put together for us. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Just a couple words as we talk about the youth work program. I know Tim and I talked in 2019 about the necessity of keeping our young people busy, not only busy working, but as it relates to work development and increasing their skills. I heard on the radio this morning, also coming in, the advertisement about our youth work program that will be starting. Tim McCarthy will be in our next meeting to talk a little bit more about. I see Laura is on. I want to ask her to speak, but just real excited about that opportunity. And also, I think it's going to last only maybe 3 months, but looking at the extension of a work program for youth. In addition, as it relates to this draft proposal, Jeff, your staff and you, in my opinion, hit the bullseye. You hit the consciousness of the people in this community, in this county, and you hit the heart of the board and what our priorities are. You did it. I mean, I only have a couple maybe suggestions or whatever, but your staff, you and your staff did a great job listening. You not only heard what our concerns are, but you listened and incorporated that. I just applaud you guys on the strategy that you use, as you say, the stakeholders, the public hearing, including us, of course, with our input, but just the strategy that you use to bring this draft proposal about. And I say kudos to you and your staff.
Thank you, Madam President. And as we said at the beginning of this, this all starts with the policy direction and guidance of the board. So I thank the board for your clear and consistent policy direction on what the three of you have indicated from the very beginning was important to the county. And from there, you empowered us to go out and hold some stakeholder meetings, organize the public input process. So at the end of the day, I think I said, there shouldn't be many surprises when it comes back to you, because it ultimately should reflect the policy guidance of the board, recognizing that when you get down into the devil in the details, there's always going to be some issues about whether we put some money here or put some money there. So everything that's been said today, from the discussion of nonprofit budgets to small business, things like suicide prevention, mortgage relief, utility relief, we will look at all of those things. We will begin to modify the plan that we've submitted with some of the suggestions provided here, so that when we bring it back to you later on in June, it's a little bit more fine-tuned with these comments. And again, if there's some things that the board wants to get the administration in writing, that will only help us clarify. But I appreciate the comments. Staff has worked very hard on this. And I want to thank Holly, Bridget, all of the department heads, John, who all worked on this over the past several weeks to help us get something in front of you that we think addresses the policy direction of the board. And as was mentioned a little bit earlier, this is just the starting pistol going off for some of these things as well. As the board mentioned, some of these things we're going to want to get out very quickly. Mortgage assistance, nonprofit assistance, some of the things that we've done before and that address immediate needs. But for things like housing, workforce, health infrastructure, there are still some conversations that have to happen there. I think Commissioner Reese used the term taking time to map it out. And there are still some conversations that need to happen there in order to make sure that we're doing this right. And I think we're off to a really good start, and look forward to keeping this process going so that we continue to hit the bullseye, as you said, Commissioner.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. And as I said earlier, the veterans, for whatever reason, comes to the forefront of my mind. If there's somewhere in that draft that I maybe missed us assisting the Veteran Administration or the veterans that are homeless or whatever, if you could please point that out to me, but I didn't see it in the plan. So I will probably be sending that in as an addition.
Thank you. That's very helpful. And it was not, there was nothing specified around veterans. It was deemed as kind of a subset of our primarily of our work on homelessness. We did include a veterans allocation in the CARES Act plan. And we'll continue to touch base with the Veteran Services Commission as well to see if there's any additional areas of need, Commissioner, that they would want to identify.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it. Okay.
Can you,
and I would like
President, can you reiterate the timeline here? I didn't write it down.
And that's what I was just getting ready to do. Yeah. June the 14th, I was saying, which is a Monday, if you can get in your final comments to the administration. And I know Commissioner Dreehouse, you said you'll probably have yours done by the end of the week, which is fine. I'm sure they'd rather get it early than, as soon as possible. So and my effort is on the 15th when we meet that he can have everything together that we've submitted for another general update. So the 14th was the date that I had given. Okay.
Can I ask a question about that? So then on the 15th, at the staff meeting, are we just going to have an overview of each commissioner's ideas? Or are we expecting, I'm just wondering if we're asking for too quick of a turnaround for staff, if we're expecting them to incorporate those things together and then offer a report? I'm not sure what's coming forward on the 15th.
Oh, okay, thanks for asking. On the 15th, if there's any additions to the draft proposal, we can bring that up. I don't see the necessity to continue to repeat what was already in there that we're in agreement with. But if you see something that's different, that you can add that on the 15th. And at that point, administration already has that different or that addition, but it would be a time where you could let the public know that you've added on veterans or whatever. So that's what we'll do on the 15th, an update from Jeff, and then letting the public know from your office, each office, what you've added on or maybe you've taken off that you don't see as important. So that's because we still have a little time to go.
So I'm wondering when you expect the final vote then to, for kind of a final plan to have been developed and we voted out?
Well, if I had a tea leaf, but I will say that if we don't have anything more to add, we can do it as soon as we find out that every commissioner has been able to give their input. I would say at the end of June, we should be completed, whatever that is, the last Thursday in June.
And Madam President, I believe that would be July 1. Jackie, is that right?
Well, the last Thursday in June is the 17th, but yes.
Is the 17th.
It would be July 1st.
Yeah, so if we can, if we receive comments from the board by the 14th, we can have a general discussion with the board again at staff meeting on the 15th. And at that point, try to turn something around as quick as possible. Again, a lot of it will just depend upon the nature of the suggestions, how significant they are in terms of modifying the plan, how much we need board discussion. But I would say, to your point, Madam President, on an outside track, we'd be looking at that point of Thursday, July 1st for passage.
That sounds good. That sounds like a good plan. Yeah, July 1st.
We could certainly even do it potentially earlier, like on the 29th at staff meeting, just depending upon, again, the nature of the recommendations.
Yeah, I mean, we can, as you were doing updates, Jeff, and probably have another update on the 29th with the finalization of that, I would think could come about on July the 1st. All input has been received. So.
Or the 17th, if we're being optimistic.
Yeah, I'm sure there'll be some discussion, but we'll see. As long as we meet our deadlines that were set and administration is able to pull it together. If one of our offices needs more time for research or for other reasons, we'll certainly allow that additional time for anybody that needs it. Okay. Very good. Nothing else to come before the commission? I would like to make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Commissioner Summer Dumas,
Yes.
Commissioner Reese,
Yes.
Commissioner Dreehouse.
Yes.
Thank you. Say something nice today.